As a world-renowned supermodel, Elle had it all: beauty, fame, and fortune. She was the envy of millions, a picture of perfection that graced the covers of magazines and billboards around the world. But when she decided to undergo a series of cosmetic surgeries to enhance her already flawless appearance, she had no idea what was in store for her. The surgeries started off well enough. Elle felt no pain, and she was thrilled with the initial results. But as the days went by, something strange began to happen. Her skin started to itch and burn, and her once perfect features began to twist and warp. Her nose became bulbous, and her lips became grotesquely swollen. Her once perfect complexion was marred by a network of scars and blemishes. Elle tried to hide her disfigurement with makeup, but it was no use. She was becoming a monster before her very eyes. As Elle's body began to change, she initially tried to hide the signs of her transformation from the public eye. She avoided the spotlight and refused to be seen in public, but it was only a matter of time before the changes became too noticeable to hide. Her once perfect skin became covered in rough scales. Her eyes grew larger and more reptilian, and her once flowing hair became tangled and matted. As the weeks turned into months, Elle's transformation became more and more pronounced. Her once graceful movements were now jerky and awkward, and her once melodic voice had turned into a rasping growl. Her fans were horrified by her appearance, and her once lucrative modeling contracts began to dry up. She became a recluse, hiding away in her mansion and avoiding all human contact. Despite her growing isolation and fear, Elle's publicist was still trying to maintain her career. One day, she was invited to appear on a popular talk show to discuss her latest work. It was a chance for her to reconnect with her fans and perhaps regain some of her lost glory. But when she arrived on set, the host was taken aback by her appearance. Elle felt a wave of shame and horror wash over her, and she fled the set in tears. One day, as she was gazing into the mirror, Elle saw something that made her blood run cold. Her reflection had turned into that of a hideous monster, with twisted features and sharp fangs. She screamed in terror. She knew then that she was doomed, that she was slowly but surely being turned into a monster because of the botched surgery. She would do anything to turn back the clock, to restore her once perfect appearance. Desperate for a solution, Elle turned to a series of specialists and doctors, hoping that they could reverse the damage that had been done. But none of them could help her, and some of them even refused to treat her, so terrible was her appearance. She was alone and frightened, trapped in a body that was no longer her own. As Elle's transformation continued, her mind began to warp as well. She became paranoid and delusional, convinced that there was a conspiracy against her. She began to see monsters lurking in the shadows and heard strange whispers in her ears. She knew that she was losing her mind, but she couldn't help it. Elle became increasingly isolated and paranoid. She withdrew from her friends and family, convinced that they were all plotting against her. Her once confident demeanor turned into one of fear and mistrust, and she began to lash out at those around her. Even her once loyal fans began to turn on her, repulsed by her grotesque appearance. One night, as she was lying in bed, Elle felt a sudden pain in her chest. She clutched at her heart, gasping for air, and then everything went black. When she woke up, she was lying on a cold metal table in a sterile room. She was surrounded by masked doctors and nurses, all staring at her with horrified expressions. "You're lucky to be alive," one of them said. "We found you just in time." Elle looked down at her body and gasped. Her skin was now a sickly gray, and her limbs had become twisted and misshapen. She was a monster, a grotesque parody of the beautiful model she had once been. As Elle lay on the table, she knew that her time was running out. She had been turned into a monster by her own vanity, and there was no going back. She closed her eyes and let out a final, shuddering breath, as the doctors looked on in horror. The once beautiful supermodel was no more, replaced by a hideous monster that was doomed to haunt their nightmares for years to come. Her death would go down in history as a cautionary tale, a warning to those who would sacrifice everything for the sake of beauty. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.